Chapter 9, Our Last Hunt. Willie B. didn't even ask about the money or the small roll of pelts until we were out of Madison. Finally, I guess when he thought his dogs were safe, he said, "How much?" $2.50. I spat out the words. He doesn't need any more. It isn't fair. I kicked the roll of pelts to the edge of the wagon. Willie B. was quiet for a bit. So how much money do we have now? I had worked through those figures so many times I didn't have to stop and think. Well, $5 for the first pelts and $2.50 today. That's $7.50, less 43 cents for more shells. So that leaves us with $7.07. The way I figure it, we still need $3.91. I picked up the black pup and stroked his back. My anger melted into worry. And the parson will be back soon. Guess we better start working on what we'll tell the church. Don't you think we'll make it? I answered him like my pa would have. Time will tell, Willie B. We each held the pup and thought our own thoughts. The wagon slowed as our fort came into view. I put the black pup back in the box and pulled the pelts over with my toe. My pa was at the table when I came in. He had a cup of coffee and was tipped back in his chair. If he had time for coffee, it meant his work was done for the day. How did you do, son? $2.50, Pa. Well, that's a good bit to add to your savings. He leaned forward and set his chair down on all four legs. But you don't look very pleased about it. I walked to the mantel and lifted down our money jar. There's the word mantel. I sat down in the chair next to Pa and dumped out the coins. I slid nickels, dimes, and pennies across the table and counted. It was just as I told Willie B. We lacked $3.91. It's not enough, Pa. True, but the money's coming in. I don't guess I see your problem. He moved his coffee cup out of his way, folded his hands, and waited. I laid it all out the way I had it figured. We still need 6 more pelts to add to the 10 I brought home, and that's only good if the man at the general store will buy them. If he won't buy them, then, well, I don't think we can keep our word on this, Pa. No, son, you're wrong there. He wasn't mad, but his voice was hard. If you learn nothing else from all of this, learn this much. A man must always keep his word. He took a deep breath. You've got it figured out right, though. You can look for another way, or you could just keep hunting on the chance he'll buy the pelts. Only 6? He rubbed his chin and looked at me. Just this once. I'll do your chores on Saturday, and you two get an early start hunting. Let's don't borrow trouble until we need to. That week, school dragged by one slow day after another. Finally, Mr. Gold dismissed us for the weekend. Willie B. promised he'd be ready early the next morning. It was still dark when I rolled out of bed. I ate some cold cornbread left over from last night's supper and collected everything I'd need for the day. I shouldered Pa's rifle, strapped on my knife, and dropped extra shells into the front pocket of my overalls. Ma had made my lunch and left it on the drain board. I slipped quietly out the door and headed across the fields to Willie B.'s. I heard their cows first, and when I rounded the bend, I saw Willie B.'s Pa coming from the barn with 2 full milk pails. Morning, Jamie. Here he comes. Willie B. was still fastening the strap on his overalls. Chain that dog, son. Willie B. yawned before he answered. No, sir, but she's in her pen. Chain her, I said. She's weaning those pups. She may try to follow you. All right. Willie B. mumbled something and turned toward the barn. He rummaged around the harnesses looking for a chain and then disappeared to Dog's pen. It wasn't long before he was back and we were off. Couldn't find a chain, but I tied her. My pa was right about the early start. The air was cold enough to see your breath, but not cold enough to slow the rabbit yet. By the time the sun was high overhead, we had tied our jackets around our waist, and each of us had rabbits dangling from our belts. We hiked to our favorite spot and stopped for lunch. 4 rabbits, Jamie. We only need 2 more, and we still have all afternoon. He grinned at me. We'll have that Bible for Christmas. I hope you're right, Willie B. Done eating? Willie B. wiped his sleeve across his mouth and reached for the rifle. I handed it to him. He stepped quietly toward the bushes, waved me back, and without a sound began stalking. I trailed close behind and watched. He raised the gun and trained its sights on a movement that rippled along the brush. He followed the rustling branches until the animal stepped into the clearing, then squeezed the trigger. No! I leaped forward and knocked the barrel away. The report of the bullet broke the stillness of the clearing, and the smell of the gunpowder stung my nose. A furry white body tumbled down in its tracks. Dog. We should have yelled, but neither of us made a sound. Willie B's arms fell heavily with the rifle still in his hands. He didn't move. He strained to see her, but he didn't take the first step. I don't remember how I got to Dog. I just know I was kneeling beside her. I yelled back to Willie B, "Help me!" I watched him bend his knees and put the Winchester on the ground. Slowly and deliberately, he drove himself forward one foot after the other until he stood over Dog. A piece of rope dangled from her neck. You could see where she'd chewed it. Her sides were heaving for air, and she writhed in pain. Leaves and twigs were tangled in her dirty white fur, but I couldn't see any blood. Even so, I was afraid to touch her. "Roll her over, Willie B." He slid his hand under her belly and gently rolled her onto her back. She yelped as he turned her over. "Her leg, Willie B. Look, her back leg." She'd been hit just above the knee. I looked up at Willie B. Tears were trailing down his face, but he wasn't making a sound. "We've got to get her to my house, Willie B. It's the closest." I looked around for something. "Get that limb." I laid the rifle beside the limb and pulled my jacket from my waist. "Your jacket too, Willie B. Tie it to both sides. Now take her head and talk to her." Together we moved Dog onto the stretcher, and with me on one end and Willie B on the other, we lifted the rifle and the limb and carried Dog home to Ma. So what they did is they used the rifle and a limb kind of like this, even though they'd be way, way bigger. And they put the jacket in between the two so that it made kind of like a little bed, and they laid they laid Dog on the stretcher. I went ahead and read the whole chapter for you today because I knew it was a good one. All right, we'll see what happens tomorrow.